morning. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the Harriet Joyce Foundation for inviting me, and especially to Mr. Jeffrey Himmel, whose amazing foresight to bring all these people together is indeed a lesson for all of us to learn. I've known of his generosity to different projects, programs, and I've especially seen his generosity to the American Diabetes Association, which is so close to my heart. So thank you, Jeffrey, and of course, with Jeffrey is his wife, Patricia. When I told her she's also, um, has been a leader for this program, and she said, "No, it's my husband." And I told her, of course, it takes two to tango. I'd like to thank also Dr. Zavalos, Dr. Solazano, and of course, Richard Deckelbaum, who's not with us, but I'm sure he's watching because he was instrumental in getting the right speakers for this program. So thank you, Richard, wherever you are. And Dan, I'm so glad to see you here. So to begin with, there is increasing evidence that feeding practices in infancy and early childhood is very important in terms of having implications which are lifelong. It has effect on your health. It has effect on productivity of these children as they grow older. So, a couple of the speakers spoke about the first 1,000 days of life, excuse me, to reduce child undernutrition. So I'm going to be looking at the dietary guidelines that are from the United States. This is the first time that these dietary guidelines have included guidelines for children from 0 to 24 months. So it's very exciting to see that they are picking up all the evidence that are so vital in the development of our children. So the objectives for my lecture would be to discuss the nutrition guidelines, to review the nutrition strategies to lower the risk for undernutrition, and discuss eating patterns to improve child health. And of course, Nancy has already put your Ecuadorian guidelines with this wonderful wooden spoon. But what was also very interesting for me to see is, there is a little with the family eating together, which is so important to get children also to eat a variety of foods. So getting kids to eat with their parents and grandparents is so important. And of course, not to forget what the fishermen do, what the farmers do for the health of the children. And of course, the physical activity is always a part of any nutrition guidelines. So childhood stunting can start from the womb. That's why it's 1,000 days. So from the time of conception. And so it gives a window of opportunity to build healthier and more prosperous futures. And children who do not get this adequate nutrition during the first 1,000 days between the mother's pregnancy and the second birthday can have physical and cognitive developmental problems. And we also have to remember that different stages require different have different nutrient requirements. So during this period, it's also important for the brain development. And so there are certain foods that can help with brain development in the diets of the pregnant women, like including fatty fish, but which are of good quality, which don't have methyl mercury in it. So we have, I'm sure your country's regulations include which fishes are okay to eat and which a pregnant woman should not eat. So there are guidelines for that as well. So when you talk about undernutrition, it's underconsumption of nutrients. But also you have to remember there could be an overexposure for contaminants from water supply, soil, food crops, and animal waste. And as you know, these will be discussed during the rest of the conference. So starting levels, there was a publication in 2017 that looked at stunting levels in some of the rural areas of Ecuador, Chimborazo, which has very high stunting levels. And I'm very excited to learn from the World Vision, which is going to be speaking today on their little project in Chimborazo, which was incredible that they included local government as well as the health establishment to get some good results that they will be presenting for us. And as Nancy said in her talk, there's lots of fruits and vegetables that are available. She showed us these wonderful pictures. But my question is, are they affordable for the children to eat? So there are special considerations for the pregnant women or those who are nursing their babies. The nutrients in needs increase during pregnancy. They have to make sure they're eating nutrient dense foods, and they have to make sure they get enough folic acid. It should start 1 month prior to conception, and also their gynecologists, obstetricians will be recommending a daily prenatal vitamin and mineral supplementation that should be consumed by these women. And lactation also has increased nutrient needs, more calories, more protein, and also getting foods that have folate, iron, iodine, and choline. And there has been a paper published to show that anemia in pregnancy is associated with stunting in children. So this is something that could be carried on. I mean, the woman has anemia, but also the child is going to suffer as a result of that. So any supplementation has to be discussed with the healthcare provider. That's really important to do. As I said, seafood is recommended, and it is associated with favorable measures of cognitive development in young children, about 8 to 12 ounces per week. And of course, they should not have any metal contaminants. Alcohol should not be consumed in pregnancy and is also not recommended during lactation. And caffeine, of course, a little bit of caffeine is not shown to be problematic. So if you're going to have a cup of coffee, that's probably going to give you 140 to 200 milligrams, unless you have 12 ounces. That could be almost like 300 milligrams of caffeine. So you should be careful about the amount of coffee that you consume. So for the first 6 months of life, the child has to get, what's recommended is the child should get only human milk. And it's also recommended to continue through the first year of life and longer if desired. And to have to feed infants, if they have to get the formula, it should be iron fortified during the first year of life if the human milk is not available. And supplemental vitamin D has to be provided soon after birth. So at about 6 months, the infants can be introduced to complementary foods that also should be nutrient dense. It's not like giving toddler milks or toddler drinks that are full of sugar and fat, but to be given nutrient dense foods, that everyday foods that their parents will be eating, but in smaller quantities, and also to be careful that there are no choking hazards for the baby with the size of the food that's given to the baby. And it's also a good time to introduce foods that you think could be have allergenic properties, like peanuts or fish or eggs, wheat. It's good to introduce them so that there'll be less of an issue as they grow older, and we may not even get those allergies. So the key recommendation again is to have a variety of foods, and your Ecuadorian wooden spoon gives you the whole story. And it's important to avoid all foods with sugar in it, because there is no room for sugar calories in a baby's diet. So it's really very important to do that. So when you're putting all these recommendations together, again, the human milk, it's important to encourage the mother to feed the baby. It has not just the nutrients like the protein, but also has bioactive substances and has immunologic properties that will support infant health as well as growth and development. And again, if the human milk is not available for the baby, iron fortified commercial infant formula. That's regulated by your regulating agency. And it's also important to remember that if you're giving powdered infant formula, how you mix it is important. So the quality of the water is very important. So you defeat the purpose by giving water that's contaminated to mix the formula. And if you're going to get it from donors, human milk, it's also very important to make sure you've taken the safety precautions. The supplemental vitamin D is very important. All infants who are fed the human milk should receive a vitamin D supplement of 400 international units beginning soon after birth. And also the infant formula has to be fortified with vitamin D. So when you're introducing complementary foods, it's important to introduce flavors, textures, and different types of foods. And it sometimes takes a long time before the child will appreciate it. What's been shown is it takes like 8 to 10 exposures before the child will begin to eat something the parents want the child to eat, and which is also very nutritious. And the choking hazard has to be um, paid attention to, because any product that is can get stuck in the throat is going to be quite hazardous for the baby. And then you know when the child is ready to eat, when the child is sitting up, has a control of head and neck, and so also make the child sit in a proper, like a high chair, so that the feeding becomes easy for the child to enjoy the food. And also, you have to make sure the child is comfortable so there are no swallowing issues. Um, so as I said, introduce the potentially allergenic foods early so that there's no reason why the child can develop an allergy. And it's also recommended that even peanuts can be introduced early so that there's less of a chance of the child developing a peanut allergy. Again, with the complementary foods, it's very important to include a whole bunch of the grains, the beans, iron-rich foods, the meats, seafood, which are high in heme iron. The eggs are not high in heme iron, so you need to have something with vitamin C to make it available. So he's given me just 2 more minutes. So I'm going to rush through. So again, as I said, anything that you give, it shouldn't be just like a beverage for the child. It should be a formula which is properly adjusted for all the micronutrients that the child should be having. So I'm going to skip through this because I've said it already that the child should not be having sugar. There's no room for sugar. And plant-based milks, which are very popular in the U.S., should not be given during the first year of life. Neither should cow's milk. It can be given after the first year of life. What happened? It's not moving. Okay. And they have set up some dietary patterns. I know Nancy also showed you how it gets calculated here. So there is room for all the different foods that give you nutrients that should be included in the complementary feeding, and also beyond the 23 months of age. And to make sure the foods that are given are not like fried and have sugar in it. The child gets very used to having salty food and sugary foods, so it's very important to be attentive to those issues. Um, so what will happen if you don't do something right now? The cost is high, and there are publications from FAO that show the cost can be extremely high if nothing is done to prevent stunting and wasting in the children. And similarly, there's that shows that the cost can be very high when due to loss of productivity, loss of quality of life. So there is, have to take action right now. This is an interesting one, which I think some of another speakers spoke about. But what I wanted to point out here is, the stunting may have gone down a little bit, according to this, like 0.7%. But what's happening is the children are getting overweight and obese. And also the adults are getting, if you compare 2012 to 2022, you will see the numbers for Ecuador, which is the first line. The obesity is going up in the adults and also among the children. And what I've seen is in children, as they get obese, you get so many different problems, type 2 diabetes, their blood pressures, and even non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So in addition, I think when you think of health, think of their teeth as well, because caries is an infectious disease, and it's important that if a child is fed a bottle with sugar in it at night, is going to develop, have demineralization of the tooth enamel. So, what you get is a baby bottle tooth decay, and this leads to quality of life of the child, because the child will not be able to sleep, will be crying, will not eat as much. So all these factors will also affect eating and having an effect on growth and development of the child. So to prevent it, don't add sugar, make the child sit up, don't provide bottles at bedtime, just only at mealtime, and also make sure they brush their teeth after breakfast and before bed. So with this, I'd like to thank you for listening, because children eat just a little bit, so make sure that every bite counts. Thank you so much.
Ahora vamos a invitarle a la doctora Andrea Prado para que nos presente la perspectiva desde el Ecuador.
Muy buenos días con todos los presentes, estimados docentes nacionales e internacionales. Roberto, María de Lourdes, qué gusto poder compartir este espacio con ustedes y a la sociedad civil también. En primer lugar, voy a agradecer a dos personas que, conocedores de la realidad territorial, han fomentado este espacio de diálogo para que se pueda construir una ejecución de esta política ya marcada y tenga un impacto. Al doctor Juan Carlos Ceballos y al doctor Javier Solórzano, muchas gracias. Bueno, resumir en 13 minutos todas las acciones que el Ministerio de Salud Pública en conjunto con diversas instituciones ejecuta y realiza para reducir y disminuir la desnutrición crónica infantil, realmente es bastante corto. Existen muchas acciones, pero sobre todo es un desafío para el Ministerio de Salud Pública el hecho de poder llegar a cumplir esta meta de reducir la desnutrición crónica infantil, comprendiendo y entendiendo todo el impacto que tiene sobre el desarrollo infantil de los niños. Es así que el Ministerio de Salud Pública, contarles que en el año 2023 incluye en su plan decenal como un objetivo número 1 de equidad en la salud el hecho de reducir la desnutrición crónica infantil en 6 puntos porcentuales en este plan decenal a 10 años. Y evidentemente para poder ejecutar este plan, ejecuta y desarrolla lo que se denomina el Acuerdo Ministerial 1211, con el objetivo de identificar dos acciones. La primera, la ejecución del paquete priorizado que va a ser aplicado a las madres adolescentes y mujeres embarazadas y niños menores de 2 años, con el objetivo de entregar un conjunto de bienes y servicios que ya les voy a comentar. Y en segundo punto tenemos la asignación del denominado presupuesto por resultados, o PPR, un presupuesto controlado que tiene el objetivo de ser invertido en diversas acciones que van a estar enmarcadas en este mismo fin. Contarles que el presupuesto del Estado actualmente es de $112 millones a través de la estrategia PPR y que tiene el objetivo de ser invertido en asuntos de gasto corriente o de inversión en diversos aspectos de medicamentos, insumos, dispositivos de laboratorio, infraestructura o equipamiento, así como vacunas para poder evidentemente adquirir y abastecer este famoso paquete priorizado. Es así que, adicional a todo esto, se ejecuta también el Plan Estratégico Intersectorial para la Desnutrición Crónica Infantil, el cual, correctamente liderado por la Secretaría Técnica Ecuador Crece Sin Desnutrición Infantil, hemos logrado actualizar el Plan Estratégico para el año 2025-2030. Y de esta forma, el Gobierno nacional, como nos decía María de Lourdes, entendiendo que es una prioridad para el Gobierno, se enmarca en el eje social, en salud integral, en el objetivo número 1. ¿Qué es este paquete priorizado? Y desde el punto de vista de salud, mi intervención va a encontrarse enfocada a las acciones de promoción y de prevención que realiza el Ministerio de Salud Pública, en coordinación con los distintos actores que son sociedad civil, los GATS, la Secretaría Técnica, el INEC, el Ministerio de Inclusión Económica y Social y otros. El paquete priorizado entonces va a consistir que a las mujeres embarazadas desde la detección de su embarazo se entreguen la vacunación completa y oportuna, ecografías obstétricas, consejería y educación prenatal, el plan de trabajo y transporte, suplementación de vitaminas y micronutrientes, exámenes clínicos y controles prenatales. Y asimismo al niño o a la niña menor de 2 años se entregue las prácticas integrales del parto, el tamizaje de enfermedades metabólicas, la consejería en lactancia materna y alimentación, la evaluación del desarrollo psicomotor, la suplementación de micronutrientes, la vacunación completa y oportuna y los controles del niño sano. Evidentemente, espacios como estos nos permiten que esta estrategia llegue a todos los sectores. Me he quedado con la intervención del compañero donde nos invita a nosotros como ministerio a ejecutar acciones en los lugares de difícil acceso. Este plan estratégico intersectorial enmarca varias acciones. Dentro de estas, la primera es la articulación territorial. Luego tenemos la gestión de la información, el talento humano de la gestión interinstitucional y contarles que en este aspecto el Ministerio de Salud Pública tiene básicamente 2 proyectos grandes de inversión, de los cuales tiene una inversión de alrededor de 34 millones que permite el financiamiento de los equipos de atención integral de salud, compuestos por médicos, por enfermeras, por nutricionistas comunitarias, que permiten que esta estrategia y este paquete priorizado verdaderamente llegue a territorio. Así como la movilización de recursos que les he comentado, que es lo de PPR, y la estrategia educomunicacional. A nivel de articulación territorial, tenemos la movilización y la captación oportuna de las mujeres embarazadas. Contarles que a través de estos grupos o equipos de atención integral, el Ministerio de Salud Pública, desde el año 2022 al 2024, ha logrado captar 34.678 mujeres embarazadas. Sin embargo, esta es una estrategia o una articulación que todavía nos hace falta ajustar, nos hace falta mejorar en conjunto con las diversas acciones, los diversos organismos e instituciones que quieran sumarse a esta causa. Asimismo, podemos identificar que existe una vinculación entre pueblos y nacionalidades a través de distintas acciones que se ejecutan y, sobre todo, el seguimiento del esquema nutricional y del esquema de vacunación en estos territorios. También es importante resaltar las mesas intersectoriales parroquiales, las cuales a su vez permiten controlar y eliminar ciertos riesgos familiares y comunitarios de la desnutrición crónica infantil en lugares identificados. Estas mesas permiten un seguimiento y un monitoreo de las actividades territoriales y a su vez permiten que los líderes comunitarios se incluyan a estas mesas para formar parte activa de las mismas. Evidentemente, la meta es que las mesas intersectoriales parroquiales lleguen a compaginar con las mesas intersectoriales cantonales que están lideradas por los GATS y que de esta forma podamos articular acciones y no existan duplicidad y pérdida de recursos. Es importante también destacar la acción de los vigilantes comunitarios con énfasis en desnutrición crónica infantil. Estos vigilantes permiten que ciertas familias de escasos recursos o familias con alertas puedan encontrarse o puedan estar mapeadas por la estrategia Ecuador Crece Sin Desnutrición y de esta forma el cumplimiento del paquete priorizado tenga una mayor cobertura. En cuanto a la promoción de la salud, evidentemente existe un componente de educomunicación que básicamente es llevado a través de actividades promocionales como ferias, como casas abiertas a nivel nacional, pero sobre todo en las parroquias priorizadas. y esta permite el desarrollo de distintas actividades como, por ejemplo, talleres demostrativos de la preparación nutricional en conjunto con diversos actores como los GATS, como el Ministerio de Inclusión Económica y Social, entre otros. Un segundo punto importante es la gestión de la información. Evidentemente, al tener una estrategia ya escrita, un plan estratégico descrito que tiene marcadas cuáles son las actividades del plan, tenemos que monitorear. Y este monitoreo, a más de realizarlo por las cifras oficiales del INEC, constantemente es evaluado a través del CISEN. Es un sistema integrado de seguimiento nominal del Ministerio de Salud Pública, cuya meta es que se pueda interrelacionar con el SUSEM, el seguimiento que lleva la Secretaría Técnica Ecuador Crece sin Desnutrición y que tiene el objetivo de enlazar los distintos indicadores de las otras carteras de Estado para identificar el impacto que se está generando en la intervención. Y finalmente contarles sobre la estrategia de educomunicación y por qué esta estrategia tiene que ser abordada con una suma importancia, porque evidentemente el cambio del comportamiento en estas personas es un reto y es un desafío para todas las instituciones que trabajamos a favor de la reducción de la desnutrición crónica infantil y de que una madre o un padre comprendan de la importancia que tiene el hecho de vacunar a sus hijos, el hecho de que las autoridades locales puedan contribuir, por ejemplo, a generar espacios de movilización para el ingreso del personal o de los profesionales como tal. Eso es, en breve resumen, las actividades que ejecuta el Ministerio de Salud Pública. Estamos convencidos que evidentemente las acciones en conjunto van a permitir que se fortalezcan cada una de las aristas que viene desarrollando el Ministerio de Salud Pública. Agradecer también la contribución de las demás instituciones y sobre todo de los GATS, quienes lideran las mesas intersectoriales cantonales y han permitido también ejecutar acciones en territorio, pero sobre todo en los territorios de difícil acceso. Gracias.